hope that everybody can now see my screen. Thanks for that great introduction. Like you said, my name is Katie Paul, and I'm with the Panhandle Regional Planning Commission, and we're located in Amarillo, Texas. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about stakeholders and different strategies and methods for attracting them, engaging with them, and really maintaining contact with them, which is something that obviously, since we have a whole session about it today, something very, very important for our planning processes. So let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit on a short overview of what my agency is. Then we're going to talk briefly about a couple of challenges in public transportation planning, which I think Eric highlighted earlier in our welcome session. And then we're going to jump right into our big topic today, which is stakeholders. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of project-specific strategies that our agency has successfully implemented throughout the years. So with that, so this is a little bit about who we are. PRPC is the Council of Governments, which serves the northernmost 26 counties in the state of Texas. And if you're not super familiar with the area, if you look at a map of Texas, it's that very top portion. So there's 26 counties, and we have 63 cities that we work with on a day-to-day basis. And these cities really range in population from as little as 200 people up to the largest city, which is 200,000 people or just about. And that's the city of Amarillo. That's the largest city in our region. The next largest is around, I think, maybe 15, maybe 17,000 people. So we really have a very wide-ranging a group of cities that we work with. And so we're the lead agency for our region in transportation planning, but that's not all we do. Like a lot of the people on this call who are lead agencies or our Council of Governments, of course, we have a wide range of activities that we work through, which could be administration of grant funds all the way to like city management services in the interim when someone has staff that leave. But we have several different departments who work here. And really, due to the nature of that work that we do, we essentially function as a knowledge repository for our region. So if a city, a county, or other stakeholder has a question, they'll give us a call, and we either connect them with a resource, or we are able to maybe assist with that project, or we get them in contact with that person that they need to talk to about whatever the thing is that they're asking us a question about. And so I really administer the transportation planning program for our agency. And I've observed a couple of challenges in transportation planning that I wanted to highlight today. So here are those challenges. So really these challenges include like having limited staff. I'm very lucky at my agency because we have 3 people who are very familiar with transportation planning. One, I think, has been involved kind of since the beginning from the first regional plan that we did back in 2006. But there's really only one person that routinely works on planning, and that's me. And another thing I think that I really wanted to echo Eric's earlier message about limited funding. We're really trying to understand how we can do more with what we have right now, but then also, plan for that future where we might have to continue a similar level of service, but with less. And of course, funding for transit in general is always, perennially underfunded. But really, I think maximizing that funding and getting the most out of not only your plan, but then actually working with those stakeholders, as Kari talked about in our earlier session as well, is something that's very important. Another challenge that I've really identified is kind of a general lack of interest in transportation. That could be from elected officials, from the general public, because you might be in a region that it does not have a high need for public transit. Like our region, we have an urban provider, we have a rural provider, just like most of you do. But it seems like the need is in the rural parts of the state, in our area, but sometimes the funding is mostly centered in that more urban part of our region. Of course, there are some of you that have maybe a regional mobility authority or a transit district. Maybe you are from the transit district who probably have maybe a different experience because you've got a lot more people who are much more engaged in planning for transportation. But I think that really in our region, we've seen a lot more focus on transportation infrastructure. So the roads and bridges that get people connected, particularly because most of our region is quite rural and it can be 30, 40, maybe an hour long drive. And that's not in traffic. That's with almost no traffic between some of our cities. So we see that oftentimes here in our region. And I wanted to bring up a question for everyone to kind of think about as I go through this presentation, and it's how do we overcome these challenges? And I think that Eric really brought that to the forefront of our minds earlier today, because we are going to have to try to work through maybe having the same level of service, but not having quite as much funding, or just having less resources in general. So one of the answers, I think, maybe to that question could be really getting people more involved in our transportation planning, which is what we're talking about here today. So the first topic regarding stakeholders that I wanted to really stress is identifying your stakeholders. And it can honestly be a daunting task if maybe you have new staff who are not very familiar with transportation, or they may not be super familiar with your area because you've recruited them from maybe a bigger area, or they've come from a small area to a larger area. But your first group of stakeholders is always your planning group. Every lead agency has a planning group that's got very specific representatives, for specific populations. So really engaging with that group is most important, and paying attention to the makeup of your group. We just recently had a member who had to step down, and I'm trying to look for someone to replace that person, and it's a very specialized population that position serves. And so I'm really looking for someone who is vocal and knowledgeable, who is connected to resources, who can help us connect others to resources. So, whenever you have turnover in your planning group, which I know happens to everyone, I'm continually looking for someone who's pretty connected to others, so that we can get them in on our planning process if they haven't previously been a part of it. So we also sometimes have a quiet group up here in our region. And one of the things that we've started doing at every planning meeting we have, we always have a session at the end that can take 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes, where we kind of go around the room, or virtually, we just kind of call on people to try to see if we can get them to give us an update about different planning projects that they're working through, or new needs or gaps, or a new pain point that they might have in trying to provide their service to the people that they're working with. And sometimes, we have some county judges, and maybe they don't have a high level of transportation needs in their county, but they're wanting to be involved. So their updates can sometimes be very short. That says, we don't have any new updates, or I haven't encountered anything since we last met, which is great. Just having them there at the table and being engaged is already a lot of progress in most cases. So outside of your planning group, there may be some other stakeholders like social service agencies, maybe even city personnel. If you have a regional university that might have a transit system, or a junior college that might have students that have transit needs, those are also very good people to kind of not just bring to the table, but just be engaged with them, even with a phone call or an email, get them on a distribution list. Those are really good ways to get those people involved. Other things are municipal committees. I know that some regions have multiple cities that have a lot of advisory committees. We only have the one in Amarillo, but they have an advisory committee on aging, which is a good resource to try to get people, folks that are involved with the elderly is another great resource, because they may not be on your planning group, but they certainly are someone that you might want to consult through the 5-year planning process, but also beyond, whenever you're in your interim years trying to work through different strategies and different projects. So once you get all of your stakeholders identified, don't forget that you've got to engage with them. So engagement can really be something that is as simple as a phone call. It can be an email periodically to check in. We are working through getting a distribution list together through a website that we've just launched to try to get some specific transit information out to the people who have maybe signed up for alerts. We also have a demonstration project that I'll talk about in a little bit, that we have been able to send out some transportation alerts also to get to the general public who are using the mobile phone application that we worked through on the demonstration project. Also directing people to a website, if you have an external website, or even your agency website, is a great way to also engage people. Something that I heard earlier, that TTI is going to have some focus groups. I love that idea, because we just recently had some focus groups. It was just this week. And they really had a really good turnout, and we were able to find some new contacts that we hadn't talked to before, who really want to participate in our planning process this year. and they want to get more transportation information going forward as well. So getting those new folks involved has been very, very, very helpful for us already in the infancy of our planning. And social media is another good way to engage people. Our agency doesn't have a social media presence at this time, but all of the agencies we work with have social media. So sometimes getting a message to maybe a city, a transit authority, or another group would be, you could get them a message and they could blast it out on their social media, which is usually a good way to get people involved. But don't forget, you don't really have to have a degree in marketing or understand what SEO or search engine optimization means to really be able to get information to people out there. So that's a key point I want to stress is you don't have to be a marketer to be able to get this done, to be able to engage with people. And at the end of the day, engagement is not simply having somebody attend a planning group meeting. That's a great way to get people involved, but it extends beyond that. Your reach should be larger than that if you can make that happen. And it's really every contact that you have with someone regarding transportation. Earlier in our metrics session, I heard some really good things about some of the things that we're working through in our metrics are all of those touch points where you've engaged with someone, you've sent them some transportation information. So documenting all of those different touch points is also a great idea. But honestly, at this point, you might be thinking you don't have enough staff, you don't have enough time, you don't have enough funding to really engage with people so frequently in using these methods. Well, don't forget, you don't have to have all of these methods all the time. You can certainly work through several different methods, maybe maximize all of that engagement and use things more than once. And there's a couple of free and low-cost tools that I'll talk about at the end that are some things that we've used at our agency to maximize getting the message out to our stakeholders, but then also getting some feedback from them once we've gotten a message to those people. So the third really big item that I wanted to talk about today is maintaining engagement. This is where I don't have enough staff, I don't really have enough time to be able to get engagement out there. And I know it's not easy, but it can absolutely be done on a budget and with limited staff time. A periodic email or a phone call to that list of key stakeholders that you see at your planning meetings can oftentimes bridge that gap between meetings where you catch a project that someone's working on that maybe concludes before your next meeting, or they started working on in the interim, but maybe forget to update at your next planning meeting. Stakeholder engagement is a two-way street. Not only are you engaging with are they engaging with you, excuse me, you're also engaging with them. So making sure that those relationships are continually being cultivated by communication is incredibly important, especially as we're talking about our integrated planning process in our 5-year plan. Using an email distribution list can be very helpful. So that your agency might be able to send out a rundown of new projects, send out funding opportunities that you've identified, maybe through a state, a federal, a local funding agency, something like that. That's something that we've done. We've sent out to a couple of our private providers that could qualify for a funding opportunity, and that has been very successful as well. So checking in with those stakeholders on a regular basis helps you identify new gaps or needs that you might incorporate in your 5-year plan, because as Kari said, it's not a static document. It changes all the time. So really continuing to be involved with the people that you're working with through planning is a great way to identify those. So it's not just someone sitting in a room kind of thinking about what's going on. You're really getting all of that feedback from the people that are out providing transportation. They're out working with clients. It's a great way to do that. So recently we had our focus groups, like I said earlier, and we found that some of our transportation providers are really having a lot of struggles with a host of pandemic related issues, and their customers are suffering as well. And so right now we're trying to take some of the feedback that we got from those focus groups and trying to implement that into our plan and kind of think about some long-term projects that are going to have lasting impacts, even through our pandemic era and then maybe even beyond. And so talking to the providers and social workers a couple of days ago was really, really impactful and will help us be able to keep up with the changing needs of our community and really track those engagements. And we've got a couple of project-specific examples that I hope are going to be helpful for all of you. Here's some more information about that focus group I was talking about. So we were trying to specifically target a couple of different populations, our social service agencies, our private transportation providers, nursing and assisted living facilities, and then finally community members. So our first focus group was for our social service agencies. And as you can see, they were all held online. We used a GoToMeeting rather than Zoom just because we have a subscription to that. But honestly, any online platform works. This is the first time we held a meetings like this online, and it was honestly very successful. We were able to identify a couple of new stakeholders that we hadn't worked with before, and we were able to find some new needs as well in that conversation that maybe had blossomed out of from our last 5-year planning effort. These are some needs that were continuous, but that have maybe been exacerbated by a change in our transit system or state or local law changing. So it was really interesting to hear those things from some of those stakeholders. And we're doing the focus groups to be able to collect some data for our 5-year plan, but also we're working through a new demonstration project for a public information and education campaign. Because in our last 5-year planning process, we found that the number one across all of our different goals, strategies, objectives, the number one issue was just having people in our region understand that there are transportation resources available. In many cases, it seemed like through the data that we gathered, we had people who may have been using an option that was not safe or not cost effective, or was putting them into a state where being able to access transportation just wasn't viable. So trying to get information out to the region, to the people that need it about the options that they have for transportation has been a number one goal, because that seems to be the thing that is most lacking up here in the Panhandle. So a little bit about our focus groups. We started our meetings with a quick overview of why we plan, why their feedback is important, how to contact us in the future if they have any additional comments. And then we kind of prepared some open-ended questions that were tailored to each group. That way we could really facilitate a good conversation. And we had really, really good attendance at our first and second focus groups of the day. Our nursing and assisted living facilities group was very limited. We didn't have anyone actually join, but those groups were invited so that we could kind of get a really good picture of the entire landscape of transportation in our region. And we actually sent out a survey, and most of them had sent in a survey response. So it was okay to not have them be at our focus group. But our community members focus group there at the end of the day was very, very well attended. We had some community members, not just from the city of Amarillo, which is the largest city, but also from some smaller communities who were able to vocalize some concerns, some triumphs of our transit system, and some other needs and gaps that we are going to incorporate into our plan. This was a very new strategy for our agency to implement. And so ultimately we gathered a lot of info and data for our planning, and that was great. But we also forged a couple of different new partnerships that aren't formalized, but certainly some partnerships that we're going to try to expand on here in the next couple of years through planning and then beyond. Here's another project-specific strategy. We've traditionally conducted our surveys together, the quantitative data part of our plan from our stakeholders, and usually those are sent by, in the last 5-year plan, they were sent by paper, which was a good strategy then. We got a good response rate, and then we conducted some in-person interviews to get qualitative data. But this year we've really focused on online, mostly because of the pandemic and because it is so hard to get people together. So what we did specifically for our response rate for our human services agencies, we were able to call a stakeholder if they were already on our list. That was great, but we also kind of cold called a couple of people that we had not talked to before. And we got a much better response rate from the people that we were able to get in contact with, find a social worker or some other person at their agency who worked with transportation. And we're able to send them, follow up with an email with a survey link, and that the response rate was much better from them. We left a lot of messages though, because of the pandemic. A lot of people are out, they're sick, they're not able to work from home given whatever situation they've got. But we've so far gotten a really good response rate from our human services agencies. We think that we can probably make up that last 50% with a couple of phone calls or pseudo in-person interviews to get some more data from them. But also our nursing and assisted living facilities, we sent them a survey online, and we've got about 1/3 of them that have responded, which is more than we had in our last round of planning. They're just much harder to get in touch with. just because of the types of service they provide. A lot of it is state mandated, so they don't have as much data. They may not always work with other agencies just because of the nature of the services that they provide. And we're working through issuing some rider surveys as well in paper form and online. We're working through those partnerships with our health and human services agencies to get online surveys administered to some of their clients that ride transportation often. But we're also going to send out a couple of paper ones just because maybe even in the pandemic, if someone's not super computer literate, we can probably get a better response rate with a paper survey than if we try to get them to use the computer or use it or get it through on their phone. It's going to take a lot more staff time to do that. So just sending out a kind of a mass email, or not email, excuse me, snail mail survey in paper form is another strategy we're going to employ this year. So the survey platform we use to administer these is Google Forms, which is different from SurveyMonkey, but Google Forms is a free if you have a Google account. That was kind of the factor that we were looking for, was that we weren't going to have to pay above, a 200% responses on SurveyMonkey, I think is their limit. Google Forms can collect up to 10,000 responses, and it was able to honestly put together a pretty robust survey. So we took what we had on paper before, changed it, added some questions about maybe the pandemic, about other things, and threw it into Google Forms. And honestly, it has been very user-friendly, and a lot of our human services agencies have responded saying that they liked that better than maybe a paper form, because it was much easier for them to understand the questions, be able to pick up the phone and call us, but also get it sent out on their own time. And then we've got real-time results as well. We're not waiting for the mail to get here, which, as we all know, can be quite it can be quite slow right now. And we're really glad that Google Forms was a very easy to use and workable format. And we were able to export all of our data into Excel and be able to make custom charts and graphs, which is going to be very useful whenever we get really into the nitty-gritty of our transportation plan. So the OneRide mobile phone application is something that I was talking about earlier. This was our demonstration project that we worked on the past couple of years. So we developed a customer satisfaction survey to kind of assess the effectiveness of the phone application. And we were able to send that survey out through the app's text notification system. So this application was developed as a demonstration project because we didn't have a bus tracker or any sort of interactive app where somebody could track their ride. And just given the nature of our region, there wasn't any sort of push to try to get that here in our area. And I know that our urban transportation provider, they were having some trouble with Google trying to get their data into Google Transit, which I think they're still working on that problem. But this was just a really good way for us to get some collaborative partners between all of our transit providers here. We were able to contract with a local university to be able to develop the app. And then we were able to get it into the hands of transit users. So we got our survey together in Google Forms, sent it out through the text notification system that came with our app. And that has been very, very successful so far. We've gotten a good number of responses. And something that we're even more proud of is that we've actually got 40% of our public transit users in Potter and Randall County, which is where our urban provider runs. They are using our app, which is just amazing. And it's really been some great progress toward awareness and increased access for some of our individuals who are using transit, but may not know where their bus is. So that's another way that we used not only our surveys through Google Forms, but we also used another kind of more specialized text notification system through our OneRide Now mobile phone application. This is our website. The first is the landing page. The second shows a little bit about our past plans and reports. And then we've got a really good link to our OneRide Now transit tracker. This is another engagement tool that we're trying to utilize through a comprehensive website that has a bunch of transportation resources and other items. We use Google Sites for this. It was very easy to use in designing a website. And again, it's free if you have a Google account. We didn't have to pay a web developer to make us something. We were able to make something in Google Sites that was very professional, very clean, very resource heavy, but also user friendly, which was something we were really looking for in trying to get a website together, because we wanted to have not only our existing website that kind of looked like it was from the 90s. We were trying to kind of bring it into the 21st century and get something that was a little more a little more user-friendly from what we had before. But this is an important resource whenever you're trying to get people to understand what you do, because oftentimes people don't understand what a lead planning agency is, especially if they're a member of the public or if they're another, like a social service agency who just doesn't know what you do. This is a good way to introduce them to what you do, just because you can put all of your past reports, plans, and other resources on a website. And then finally, this is a little bit about our low cost and free services that we've used for stakeholder engagement. Canva, the first one listed there, is very simple for graphic design. So if you don't have a graphic designer on staff, you are not a graphic designer, it's very useful for flyers, graphics, very simple design. And actually this presentation that you're looking at today was designed in Canva and then exported to PowerPoint. It's great because it can work between the two systems. And all of the graphics for our website that I showed on the previous slide, we made those in Canva as well. MailChimp is something you've likely heard about. It's just the one that I've used for email distribution in the past for other organizations and things that I'm participating in. But they have a free and a paid option, and they also have some features like you can upload your contact list and maintain it there. People can unsubscribe if they don't want your alert anymore. It's really good for newsletters and for sending update emails. We, like I said, don't use this service yet, but we're kind of thinking about maybe implementing it in the future to provide updates on our 5-year planning process. And then the final two there are Google Forms and Google Sites, which I've already talked a little bit about. Again, they're free if you have a Google account. And these have been incredibly useful for us as we've been working through some of our 5-year planning stuff, because they really don't take much time to update and are very user-friendly. All right, so here's all of my contact information. I wanted to thank PTM for hosting this conference today and asking me to speak a little bit about stakeholders and some of the strategies and methods that our agency has been using to continually engage people in public transportation. I hope that you've picked up a couple of maybe new strategies or found a new idea to use as you go through your plan. But my contact information is there. And of course, collaboration is a super useful tool, particularly when we're talking about, everyone's going through the same process. So if there's something that you think you would like to get some more information about, or if there's a specific topic I covered today, please absolutely reach out. And I just wanted to say thank you again to everybody for having me here today.
We should have everyone together at this point. Let's see.
Yep, everyone that's still here is back.
Fantastic, great. Well, thank you all. I guess now we will be handling some of the questions. I know that Josh said that we already had one question. If Josh, if you want to help us with that, and please enter your questions.
Sure, Kari.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am monitoring the chat. Right now, we just had one question that came from WSC, Work Services Corporation in Wichita Falls. Going to take a crack at pronouncing her name. Melisha Razan asked, where would I locate the information regarding disabilities? And my apologies if I said your name wrong.
The information regarding disabilities that I mentioned in the presentation, that's uploaded to the forums, a link to that report. And you can go to regionalserviceplanning.org.
That's all for the chat so far.
Okay. Actually, I just saw a question pop up.
Okay, from Jamila?
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right. Jamila is asking, how many plans are typically updated by consultants versus in-house staff these days? And that's something that there was a big shift last time in 2017. It's, I want to say maybe only 5 or 6 were consultants, but this time it's a full half of the agencies who are using consultants, and some of them are using them obviously for the first time. Great. And that's something I mentioned in the pre-recorded. Even if you've got the consultants there, the importance of staying on track and making sure that you know who the stakeholders are and the partners are, who's getting invited, to have a hand in that so that you can stay in touch later on. Great. I know I said that lunch was coming after this, but we definitely do have time for some more questions for me or for Katie, preferably. So I guess one thing to think about is what things you would take from this session in particular and be able to implement when you get back on, I guess, Monday morning and you're looking at the pile of stuff on your desk.
One more question in the chat, Kari.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes.
About covering the call for project cycle again, the timing of
covering the, oh yeah. So the timing of it, all of the grants started on September 1st or whenever they were executed. And we will be, they close the end of February in 2022. We'll be expecting, I will be expecting to get versions of the plans to review at least a month before the end of the contract. And hopefully more than that, because I'll be going through and we'll be comparing what's in the plan versus what was in the PGA description. So over that time, it's up to y'all to phase the different parts of involvement and pulling things together. I know that some folks are just getting started now, which totally makes sense. And for those of you who are procuring consultants, I know that process has just started. So I know a lot of plans are going to be kicking off in January.
And I see that there was one comment, not really a question, but you can see it in the chat just above the question about the project cycle.
Oh, yes. Okay. Not a question. Our group discussed public involvement and response, or lack of response rather, from the public, and whether it was a need to change course in terms of outreach or whether it was in fact public apathy. I think I'm going to be an optimist here and say that it may be a need to change course. It may be the tone of the messaging. It may be the format. I know a lot of times I fall into government speak, especially when I'm talking about the purpose of things and everyone has ridiculous long titles. And the name of section 5304 is a ridiculous long title. So that might be something to reach out to. I do know that people are overwhelmed right now. I mean, personally, professionally, definitely there's a lot going on. But I would like to think that getting a response, it might just be trying the different avenues. And hopefully you've heard some of those today. Let's see, and I see there's another question. Oh, a follow-up from Andrew. The question is in reference to the call for projects for funding the projects that are in the plans. Oh, okay. So the coordinated call is where most of those projects would come in. That's where there's funding for discretionary planning projects. Also rural discretionary funding. Those projects for this cycle were just awarded this summer, and those PGAs have just started. The next cycle that would be available is for section 5310. And that would be for transit providers. Either if you're the agency who provides the transit, that's one to consider, or if you've got partner agencies who serve seniors and individuals with disabilities, that's another option. And those are going to be if you are not the transit provider, then the transit providers in your area should be like maybe number 2 under 911 in terms of your hotline on who you want to contact and who you want to stay in touch with. So 5310, the application cycle for that is going to open in February. Basically, it'll be open in the spring. I don't have the exact dates. And those will be reviewed in late spring, awards in the summer, and then those PGAs will go live September 1st, 2021. It'll be the fall of 2021 and the spring of 2022 when the next coordinated call will be open. And that's where you have the planning. Also RTAP, Rural Transit Assistance. That's great for technology things, also training needs. That's when those calls will be open. So hopefully that covers it. Those are on alternate, they're 2-year cycles and they alternate between 5310 and the coordinated call. So, okay, so there's a follow-up now. How do you see the shift in the questions being asked mentioned earlier? How do we retain what we have affecting this planning effort relative to private or to prior efforts? Not quite sure I understand the gist of the question, but I'll go with what I'm getting from it. I definitely think that there is a potential for building on what efforts were done before, looking at who was contacted in the past and reaching out to them again, or hopefully you've been engaged with them the whole time and getting some of that same information so that you can develop a trend. But I do think, given all of the changes that have happened in Texas with demographics, given the current pandemic situation, and not to get all gloom and doom, but the fact that another pandemic could happen in the future, that there are a lot of different elements to consider right now. So whereas the previous plan may have been a solid foundation, there's going to be a lot of re-envisioning coming around this time, I would predict. Hopefully that was some kind of an answer. Great, okay. And this is, these kinds of questions too would be really great to pose to your peers in the forums, because the folks who are working on the plans have more experience. Even if they're just starting on the plans, they would know more about the process of doing it than I do at this point. It's been a while since I wrote a plan or worked on writing a plan, so I might be a little rusty on some of these points. We've got a few minutes for some more questions. And if something doesn't come to you right now, then we have the Q&A at the end of the day as well. So a quick question for me to all of you. Did you find the breakout room helpful for this session? All right, I see a lot of enthusiastic yeses. Great. Yes, that was the best that we could do. I know we can't sit together at tables and talk. So that's, we were trying to give some of that personal touch to everything. So hopefully, and hopefully it'll be helpful this afternoon as well. Great. I'm really glad to see.